The thunderous hoofbeats echoed through Lewiston's dusty Main Street as a weary rider approached, his silhouette wavering in the shimmering heat of the Montana summer of 1876. Noah O'Malley slumped in his saddle, his once fine shirt hanging in tatters around his lean frame, patches of sun-bronzed skin visible through the tears. Behind him, two small children clung to the saddle, their faces streaked with trail dust and dried tears. The townsfolk paused in their daily routines, eyeing the newcomer with a mixture of curiosity and caution as he guided his exhausted horse toward the hitching post outside the general store. Zoe Larson looked up from her workbench when the bell above her shop door jangled. Through the window, she caught sight of the stranger dismounting with careful movements, lifting a small boy and then a girl from the horse's back. Her seamstress's eye immediately registered the dire state of their clothing. The man's shirt and trousers were beyond salvation, and the children's garments weren't faring much better. Their clothing told a story of hard travel and harder times. "Papa, are we staying here now?" the little girl asked, her voice carrying through the open window of Zoe's shop. "Just for a spell, Emma," the man replied, his voice deep but gentle as he knelt before his children. "Just long enough to get you both some proper clothes and maybe a real bed for the night." Zoe set aside the wedding dress she'd been altering and moved toward the door. The summer heat hit her full force as she stepped onto the boardwalk, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. The stranger turned at the sound of her approach, and their eyes met. "Looks like you folks could use a seamstress," she said, offering a warm smile. Noah O'Malley studied the woman before him. She was perhaps 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though a few tendrils had escaped to frame her face. Her blue eyes held a directness that he found refreshing after months of sidelong glances and whispered judgments. "That we could, madam," he admitted, tipping his weathered hat. "Though I'm not certain my purse is as healthy as it ought to be for such services." Zoe's gaze shifted to the children. The boy couldn't be more than 6, with his father's striking green eyes and a solemn expression that seemed too old for his young face. The girl was younger, perhaps 4, clutching a ragged doll to her chest. "Why don't you bring them inside?" "It's cooler and I've got some lemonade," she offered, then added with professional authority, "I'll need to measure them properly anyway." "Daniel and Emma could certainly use some refreshment," Noah said, placing a protective hand on each child's shoulder. "I'm Noah O'Malley." "Zoe Larson," she replied. "I've had my shop here in Lewiston for 3 years now." Inside her shop, Zoe poured lemonade for the children while Noah stood awkwardly by the doorway, as if uncertain of his welcome. "I'll measure the children first," Zoe said, retrieving her measuring tape from her workbench. "Children grow so quickly, and from the looks of it, these two have been making do with whatever they had for some time." Noah watched as she knelt before Daniel, speaking softly to the boy as she wrapped the measuring tape around his slight frame. Emma, initially shy, soon giggled as Zoe pretended the measuring tape was a snake, making it dance before taking her measurements. "You have a way with children," Noah observed. Zoe glanced up, her expression softening. "I have 7 brothers and sisters back in Ohio. I was the oldest, so I helped raise most of them." "Your parents must miss your help," he said. A shadow crossed her face. "They passed on. Fever took them both 3 winters ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Noah said, the simple words carrying the weight of genuine understanding. "Thank you." Zoe straightened, tucking her measuring tape into her apron pocket. "Now, let's see about you, Mr. O'Malley." Noah glanced down at his torn clothes and shook his head. "I can make do a while longer. The children are what matters." Zoe crossed her arms. "If you'll pardon my saying so, you're in no position to turn down help. Besides, what kind of father can provide if he can't even present himself properly? Their eyes met in a silent challenge, and after a moment, Noah's mouth quirked in the ghost of a smile. "You make a fair point, Miss Larson." "I usually do," she replied, unable to suppress a small smile of her own. "Now, arms out." As Zoe took his measurements, Noah became acutely aware of her proximity. It had been a long time since he'd been this close to a woman, and longer still since he'd felt the stirring of interest that now hummed through him. She worked efficiently, her fingers occasionally brushing against him through the torn fabric of his shirt, each touch sending an unexpected jolt through his weary body. "What brings you to Lewiston, Mr. O'Malley?" she asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. Noah hesitated, his gaze drifting to his children, who were now examining a basket of fabric scraps Zoe had provided for their amusement. "A fresh start," he finally said. "My wife passed during childbirth last winter. Our farm in Kansas wasn't prospering, and there were complications with her family. It seemed best to move on." Zoe's hand stilled momentarily. "I'm sorry for your loss," she echoed his earlier sentiment, understanding now the shadows in his eyes and the protective way he watched his children. "Thank you." Noah straightened as she finished her measurements. "How much do I owe you for the children's clothes?" Zoe considered him for a moment. "I could use some help around the shop. The roof's been leaking, and there's a broken step out back that needs mending." "You do that, and we'll call it even for the children." "And my clothes?" he asked. "We can discuss payment for those after I see how handy you are with a hammer," she replied with a practical nod. "There's a boarding house 2 doors down. Mrs. Peterson is fair with her rates, and she serves a decent meal." Noah studied her face, trying to discern her motives. Kindness was rare in his recent experience, and he'd learned the hard way that most people wanted something in return. "Why are you helping us?" he asked bluntly. Zoe met his gaze squarely. "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most." She turned away, gathering the children's measurements from her workbench. "The clothes will be ready by tomorrow afternoon. I have some fabric that will do nicely." Noah watched as she busied herself with her work, a strange feeling settling in his chest, something like hope, fragile but persistent. "Thank you, Miss Larson," he said softly. She looked up, her expression softening. "You're welcome, Mr. O'Malley." As Noah gathered his children to find Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, he couldn't help but look back at the seamstress's shop. For the first time in many months, he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten just a fraction. Lewiston, Montana, wasn't where he'd planned to stop, but something told him their journey might have reached its end. The following morning dawned clear and bright, the summer sun already warming the eastern Montana landscape, as Noah led his children back to Zoe's shop. He'd spent a restless night at the boarding house, his mind filled with thoughts of auburn hair and direct blue eyes, interspersed with worries about their dwindling funds and uncertain future. Mrs. Peterson had indeed been fair with her rates, and her roast beef had been the best meal they'd had in weeks. The children had fallen asleep almost immediately in the small but clean room, leaving Noah to sit by the window, watching the quiet Main Street and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Now, as they approached the seamstress's shop, he noted that the closed sign still hung in the window, though he could see movement inside. He hesitated, not wanting to disturb Zoe if she wasn't ready for customers. Before he could decide, the door swung open and Zoe stood framed in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "I thought I heard footsteps," she said by way of greeting. "You're an early riser, Mr. O'Malley." "Force of habit," he replied. "Farm life doesn't allow for sleeping late." "Nor does running a business," she agreed, stepping aside to let them enter. I've been up since dawn working on your children's clothes." Inside, Noah was surprised to see two small outfits laid out on the counter, a sturdy pair of trousers and a blue shirt for Daniel, and a simple but pretty calico dress for Emma. The quality of the workmanship was immediately apparent, even to his untrained eye. "You worked through the night?" he asked, genuinely impressed. Zoe shrugged, but he could see the pride in her eyes. "I worked quickly, and I had most of the pieces already cut. It was just a matter of putting them together." "They're beautiful," Noah said sincerely. The children approached the counter with wide eyes, Emma reaching out to touch the dress with reverent fingers. "Is this really for me?" she whispered. "It certainly is," Zoe replied, kneeling to meet the little girl's eyes. "Would you like to try it on?" Emma nodded vigorously, and Zoe led her behind a screen in the corner of the shop. Daniel followed Noah's gesture and took his new clothes to a second screen. When the children emerged, the transformation was remarkable. In clean, well-fitting clothes, they looked like different children altogether. Emma twirled, the skirt of her new dress flaring around her legs while Daniel stood straighter, as if the new shirt had restored something of his dignity. "What do you think?" Zoe asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice as she looked to Noah for approval. "I think you've worked a miracle, Miss Larson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. The sight of his children looking so well cared for after months of making do with increasingly inadequate clothing stirred something painful in his chest. Zoe's cheeks colored slightly at his praise. "It's just honest work. Now about that roof repair." "I'm at your disposal," Noah said. "Children, Miss Larson has been kind enough to provide these clothes in exchange for my help around her shop. Can I trust you two to behave while I work?" "Yes, Papa," they chorused. "They can help me sort buttons," Zoe suggested. "I have a whole box that needs organizing by size and color." With the children happily settled at a small table with the button box, Zoe led Noah through the back of the shop to a narrow staircase. "I live above the shop," she explained as they climbed the stairs. "The leak is worst in the bedroom, but I've noticed water stains in the sitting room ceiling as well." Noah followed her into a modestly furnished apartment. It was neat and feminine without being fussy, much like Zoe herself. He noted the practical furniture, the well-worn but clean rug, and the small collection of books on a shelf by the window. "You've made a nice home here," he observed. "Thank you. It's small, but it suits me." She pointed to a darkened spot on the ceiling. "That's the worst of it. I've had a bucket there during the last few rainstorms, but it's not a permanent solution." Noah examined the water stain carefully. "I'll need to see it from above. Is there access to the roof?" Zoe led him to a narrow ladder that extended through a hatch in the ceiling of a small storage room. "Be careful," she warned. "The last handyman I hired nearly broke his neck." "I appreciate your concern," Noah said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, "but I've climbed my share of ladders." On the roof, the problem was immediately apparent. Several shingles had been damaged in a recent storm, leaving a vulnerable spot where water could seep in. The repair wouldn't be difficult, but it would require materials. "I'll need to visit the lumberyard," he told Zoe when he climbed back down. "Some new shingles, roofing nails, and tar paper should set it right." Zoe nodded. "Mr. Thornton at the lumberyard knows me. Tell him to put it on my account." "I can pay," Noah began, but Zoe cut him off with a raised hand. "This is part of our arrangement, Mr. O'Malley. You provide the labor, I provide the materials." Noah wanted to argue but recognized the determination in her expression. "Very well, and the broken step you mentioned, out back leading to the garden, it's rotted through." She paused, studying him. "Have you had breakfast, Mrs. Peterson usually doesn't serve until 7. Noah shook his head. "We didn't want to wake her." I was about to make some myself. There's plenty for all of you, she offered. The simple invitation shouldn't have affected him so strongly, but Noah found himself unexpectedly moved by her continuing kindness. "That's very generous of you." "It's just breakfast," she said, but the smile she gave him suggested she understood more than she let on. Over a simple meal of oatmeal, honey, and fresh berries, Noah observed the easy way Zoe interacted with his children. She asked Daniel about his interests and listened attentively as the normally reserved boy gradually opened up about his fascination with horses. With Emma, she was patient and gentle, helping the little girl when she spilled a bit of her breakfast. "You're good with them," Noah remarked as they cleared the dishes together, the children having returned to their button-sorting task downstairs. Zoe shrugged. "Children are generally honest in their needs and feelings. It's adults who complicate things." "Is that why you never married?" Noah asked, then immediately regretted his boldness. "Forgive me, that was too personal a question." "It's all right," Zoe said, though a slight tension had entered her shoulders. "I came to Lewiston for a fresh start of my own. After my parents died, I needed to make my own way in the world. Marriage hasn't been a priority." Noah sensed there was more to the story, but he respected her privacy. Everyone had parts of their past they preferred not to discuss. He certainly did. "I should get to the lumberyard," he said, changing the subject. "The sooner I start on that roof, the sooner it'll be fixed." "Of course." Zoe seemed relieved at the shift in conversation. "I'll keep an eye on the children." The morning passed quickly as Noah worked on repairing the roof. The physical labor felt good after days in the saddle, and the simple, straightforward task gave him time to think. His original plan had been to head further west, perhaps to Oregon or Washington Territory, but their journey had taken longer than expected, and their resources were dwindling. The truth was, they needed to stop somewhere, at least long enough to replenish their funds. From his vantage point on the roof, he could see much of Lewiston. It was a decent-sized town for Montana Territory, with a main street lined with businesses, a school building at one end, and what appeared to be a small church at the other. Beyond the town proper, he could make out farmland and ranches spreading out toward the distant mountains. It looked like a place where a man might be able to find work and raise his children in peace. By midday, the roof repair was complete. Noah climbed down, satisfied with his work, to find Zoe waiting with a glass of water. "You must be parched," she said, handing it to him. "It's gotten warm up there." Noah accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply. "The roof's fixed. It should hold up well, even in a heavy rain." "Thank you," Zoe said. "I've been putting it off for too long." "The broken step is next," Noah said, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Where are the children?" "Having lunch with Mrs. Peterson. She took a shine to them this morning when she brought over some fabric she wanted altered, and she offered to feed them." Zoe smiled. "I think she misses having young ones around. Her own children are all grown and moved away." Noah nodded, relieved that his children were being cared for. "That's kind of her." "Lewiston has its share of kind people," Zoe said. "It's one of the reasons I stayed." As Noah worked on replacing the broken step that afternoon, Zoe brought him a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and apples. She sat on a nearby bench as he ate, telling him about Lewiston and its inhabitants. "Sheriff Anderson is fair but strict," she explained. "He doesn't tolerate trouble in town, which means we're spared the worst of the rowdiness you might find in other places. The school's got a good teacher, Miss Bennett, who came out from Boston 3 years ago. And Dr. Harris is getting on in years, but he knows his business." Noah listened, asking occasional questions, building a mental picture of the community. It sounded stable, which was what his children needed after so much upheaval. "What about work opportunities?" he asked as he finished his meal. For a man who knows farming and ranching, Zoe considered this. The Carson Ranch to the north is always looking for good hands, especially this time of year. And Miller's farm lost 2 workers last month when they headed to the gold fields, though that fool's errand rarely pays off for most who try it. Noah nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the information. Are you considering staying in Lewiston then? Zoe asked, trying to sound casual but not quite succeeding. Noah met her eyes, struck again by their clear blue color. I hadn't planned to, but plans can change. Yes, she agreed softly. They certainly can. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Zoe stood, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt. I should get back to work. I have a dress to finish for Mrs. Thornton by tomorrow. And I have a step to repair, Noah replied, reluctantly breaking the moment. As Zoe turned to go, Noah found himself calling after her. Miss Larson, she paused, looking back over her shoulder. Yes, Mr. O'Malley, thank you for everything. Her smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. You're welcome, Mr. O'Malley. By the time Noah finished repairing the step and a few other minor issues around Zoe's shop and apartment, the afternoon was waning. He collected his children from Mrs. Peterson, who insisted on sending them off with a basket of freshly baked cookies, and returned to Zoe's shop. They found her bent over her work table, pins held between her lips as she made adjustments to a half-finished garment. She looked up at their entrance, removing the pins and smiling at the sight of the children in their new clothes. You both still look very smart, she commented, causing Emma to twirl again and Daniel to stand a bit taller. And how was your day with Mrs. Peterson? She let us help make cookies. Emma announced, and she has a cat named Whiskers who sleeps in the window. Sounds delightful, Zoe said, her gaze moving to Noah. And how did the repairs go? All finished, he reported. The roof, the step, the loose shutters, and that drawer that was sticking in your workroom. Zoe's eyebrows rose. You didn't have to do the shutters and the drawer. I know, Noah said simply, but they needed fixing. Their eyes met again, and Noah felt that same connection from earlier, a recognition of something shared, though he couldn't have named exactly what it was. I have something for you, Zoe said, breaking the moment. She moved to a clothing rack and retrieved a carefully folded stack of fabric. Your new clothes. It's nothing fancy, just 2 shirts and a new pair of trousers, but they should hold up well. Noah took the stack, surprised at the emotion that welled up in him at this simple kindness. Thank you. What do I owe you for these? Zoe waved a hand dismissively. You've more than worked it off today. Consider us even. Noah wanted to protest, but saw that same determination in her expression that he'd noted earlier. This woman was as stubborn as she was kind. Even it is, then, he conceded. Though I feel I've gotten the better end of the bargain. Nonsense, Zoe replied. That roof has been driving me to distraction for weeks. Now, why don't you try those on to make sure they fit properly? You can use the fitting area behind the screen. The new clothes fit perfectly, of course. The fabric was sturdy but comfortable, and the stitching was immaculate. Noah stepped out from behind the screen feeling more like himself than he had in months. Much better, Zoe approved, circling him with a critical eye. Though I dare say you could use a good barber as well. Noah ran a hand over his beard, which had grown wild during their travels. Are you suggesting I'm not the pinnacle of frontier fashion, Miss Larson? Her laugh was unexpected and delightful. Far from it, Mr. O'Malley, though I must say clean clothes do improve the overall impression considerably. Papa looks handsome, Emma declared loyally, causing both adults to chuckle. Indeed he does, Zoe agreed, her cheeks coloring slightly as she realized what she'd said. She quickly busied herself with putting away her sewing supplies. Noah felt a warmth spread through him at her words, simple as they were. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him with anything like appreciation. "We should let Miss Larson close her shop," he said to his children. "It's getting late, and I'm sure she's had a long day." "Will we see you tomorrow?" Daniel asked Zoe, the question surprising Noah. His son rarely expressed interest in spending time with strangers. Zoe looked to Noah, clearly unwilling to make promises on his behalf. "That depends on your father's plans." 3 pairs of eyes turned to Noah, and he found himself reluctant to disappoint any of them. "I thought we might stay in Lewiston for a little while," he said slowly. "See about finding work and a more permanent place to stay than Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, fine as it is." The smile that bloomed on Zoe's face made his heart skip a beat. "In that case, yes, Daniel. I expect you will see me tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Zoe handed Noah a folded piece of paper. "A letter of introduction to James Carson at the Carson Ranch. He's a good man, fair with his workers. If you're looking for employment, he would be a good place to start." Noah accepted the letter, touched by her thoughtfulness. "You're making it very difficult for me to maintain my natural suspicion of helpful strangers, Miss Larson." Her eyes twinkled. "Perhaps that's my devious plan, Mr. O'Malley, to wear down your defenses with practical assistance and well-fitting clothing." "A fiendish strategy," he agreed, his own lips quirking upward. "Particularly effective against a man and his children who have been on the road too long." "Then I shall continue my assault on your skepticism tomorrow," she promised. "Good night, Mr. O'Malley. Good night, Daniel, Emma." "Good night, Miss Larson," they chorused, and as Noah led his children back to the boarding house, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time in longer than he could remember. The following morning, Noah rose early again, this time with purpose. After ensuring the children were dressed in their new clothes and fed a hearty breakfast at Mrs. Peterson's table, he asked the landlady if she would mind watching them for a few hours. "Going to see about work at the Carson place?" Mrs. Peterson asked knowingly, her shrewd eyes missing nothing. "News travels fast in Lewiston," Noah observed. "Small towns run on gossip, Mr. O'Malley," she replied cheerfully. "But don't worry, it's mostly the friendly kind around here. And yes, I'm happy to watch these darlings. We're going to bake a pie today, aren't we, children?" With Daniel and Emma happily ensconced in Mrs. Peterson's capable care, Noah set out for the Carson Ranch. It lay 3 miles north of town, a substantial operation with several outbuildings clustered around a large main house. As Noah approached on his horse, he could see men at work in the corrals and fields, a sign of a prosperous enterprise. James Carson proved to be a burly man in his 50s with a no-nonsense manner and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. He read Zoe's letter of introduction with a thoughtful expression. "Zoe Larson doesn't give her recommendation lightly," he said, studying Noah with keen eyes. "She says here you've got experience with both farming and ranching." "Yes, sir," Noah confirmed. "I worked my father's farm in Ohio until I was 20, then headed west and spent 5 years as a ranch hand in Kansas before starting my own place." "Why'd you leave it?" Carson asked bluntly. Noah hesitated, but decided honesty was the best approach. "After my wife died, there were complications with her family. They wanted custody of my children. It seemed best to make a fresh start elsewhere." Carson nodded slowly. "I appreciate a man who speaks plainly. Got 2 children, Zoe says." "Yes, sir. Daniel's 6 and Emma's 4. "Good ages," Carson commented. "Young enough to adapt to a new place." He tapped the letter against his palm, thinking, "I could use another experienced hand. Pays fair room and board plus wages. There's a cabin on the property that would suit a small family. It needs some work, but it's solid." Noah felt a surge of hope. That sounds more than fair. "There's one thing, though," Carson said, his expression serious. "I hire a man, I expect him to stay a full season at minimum. I can't have you pulling up stakes in a month when the work gets hard or you get a wild hair about moving on." "I understand," Noah said. "My children need stability. I'm not looking to move again anytime soon." Carson studied him for another long moment, then nodded decisively. "All right, then. You can start tomorrow. Come by in the morning and I'll have my foreman show you the cabin and get you settled." "Thank you, Mr. Carson," Noah said, relief washing through him. "I appreciate the opportunity." "Thank Zoe Larson," Carson replied, handing back her letter. "Her good word carries weight in these parts." As Noah rode back to town, he felt lighter than he had in months. Employment, housing, and the prospect of stability for his children all secured in a single morning. And all because a kind-hearted seamstress had taken an interest in their welfare. His first stop upon returning to town was Zoe's shop. He found her helping an elderly lady select fabric for a new Sunday dress, so he waited patiently by the door until the customer had left. "Mr. Carson offered me a job," he told her without preamble. "Starting tomorrow, there's even a cabin for the children and me." The smile that lit her face was worth the trip back to town just to see it. "That's wonderful news," she said. "The Carson Ranch is a good place. The cabin must be the old Thompson place. It's small but well built." "According to Mr. Carson, it needs some work," Noah said. "But it's ours for as long as I'm employed there." "I'm genuinely happy for you," Zoe said, and he could see that she meant it. "Your children deserve a stable home." "They do," Noah agreed, "and I have you to thank for it." Zoe shook her head. "You earned the position on your own merits." "I merely provided an introduction." "You've done far more than that," Noah insisted. "You've shown kindness to strangers when you had no reason to do so. That's rare in this world, Miss Larson." Her cheeks colored at his praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Noah said softly. "They wouldn't have." Their eyes met, and for a moment the shop seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of shared understanding. "Papa!" Emma's voice broke the moment as she and Daniel burst into the shop, followed by a slightly breathless Mrs. Peterson. "These two were so excited to tell you about their pie-making adventures. They practically dragged me down the street," the landlady explained with a good-natured laugh. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity as Noah prepared for their move to the Carson Ranch. He purchased a few essential supplies with some of their dwindling funds, had his horse reshod at the blacksmith's, and arranged to borrow Carson's wagon the following day to transport their meager possessions to the cabin. Through it all, Zoe's shop became a sort of headquarters, a place to rest, to ask advice about where to find certain items, to leave the children when they grew tired of running errands. By the end of the day, Noah found himself on her doorstep once more, this time to say goodbye. "We'll be heading to the ranch first thing in the morning," he explained. "I wanted to thank you again for everything." Zoe's smile held a hint of sadness. "I'm glad I could help. The children will thrive there, I'm sure." "I hope so," Noah said. "It's only 3 miles." "We'll come to town regularly." "I'd like that," she admitted. "I've grown rather fond of Daniel and Emma in a short time." "And their father?" Noah asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Zoe met his eyes steadily. "Their father as well," she acknowledged softly. For a heartbeat, Noah thought about stepping closer, about taking her hand or perhaps even brushing his lips against her cheek. But the moment passed, and he remained where he was, suddenly uncertain. "Good night, Miss Larson," he said instead. "Good night, Mr. O'Malley," she replied. "Good luck at the Carson Ranch." As Noah led his children back to the boarding house for their final night there, he found himself looking back over his shoulder at Zoe's shop, where a light still burned in the upstairs window. Something had begun in Lewiston, something he hadn't expected. Only time would tell what it might become. The cabin at the Carson Ranch was indeed in need of work, just as James Carson had warned. The roof was sound and the walls sturdy, but years of disuse had left their mark in the form of dust, cobwebs, and a family of mice that had taken up residence in one corner of the kitchen. Still, after their long journey and the uncertainty they'd faced, the small two-bedroom cabin felt like a palace to Noah and his children. They spent their first day cleaning from top to bottom, airing out musty bedding and making the space habitable. By nightfall, exhausted but satisfied, they sat on the small porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "Is this our home now, Papa?" Emma asked, leaning against his side. Noah put his arm around her small shoulders. "For a while at least," he said. "Do you like it?" Emma considered this seriously. "I like having a real bed again, and I like that we're staying in one place." "What about you, Daniel?" Noah asked, turning to his son. The boy had been quiet all day, diligently helping with the cleaning but saying little. Now he looked up at his father with solemn eyes. "It's all right, but I miss Mama." Noah's heart constricted. "I miss her too, son, every day." "Would she like it here?" Daniel asked. Noah thought of Sarah with her gentle laugh and practical nature. She would have already been planning a vegetable garden for the small plot behind the cabin and figuring out how to make curtains from flour sacks. "I think she would," he said honestly. "Your mama always wanted us to have a good, stable life. That's what we're trying to build here." Daniel nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Miss Zoe is nice," he offered after a moment. "She is," Noah agreed, caught off guard by the shift in conversation. "She reminds me of Mama sometimes," Daniel continued. "Not how she looks, but how she acts. Like when she was helping Emma with her dress and showing her how to make it twirl just right." Noah swallowed hard, moved by his son's observation. "Your mama would be glad to know there are kind people looking out for you." "Are we going to see Miss Zoe again?" Emma asked hopefully. "Of course," Noah assured her. "We'll go into town for supplies and to church on Sundays. We'll see Miss Zoe then." This seemed to satisfy the children, and soon after, Noah tucked them into their beds in the small room they would share. As he sat alone on the porch later, smoking his pipe and listening to the night sounds of the ranch, he found his thoughts returning to Zoe Larson. Daniel's comparison to Sarah had unsettled him, not because it was inappropriate, but because it illuminated something Noah had been reluctant to acknowledge: his growing attraction to the seamstress. It felt like a betrayal of Sarah's memory, these feelings stirring to life after lying dormant for so long. Yet he couldn't deny the way his heart lifted when Zoe smiled, or how her kindness to his children touched him deeply. "It's too soon," he murmured to the night air. "Far too soon." But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that perhaps time wasn't the issue at all. Perhaps what truly held him back was fear of opening his heart again, of risking the pain of loss that had nearly broken him before. The following weeks fell into a steady rhythm as Noah settled into his work at the Carson Ranch. The labor was hard but satisfying, the kind of physical exertion that left a man tired at the end of the day, but with the knowledge that he'd accomplished something tangible. The other ranch hands were a mixed lot, some gruff, others more talkative, but all competent and dedicated to their work. To Noah's relief, James Carson proved to be a fair employer who recognized and valued hard work. After the first week, Carson stopped by the cabin one evening. "Your children need schooling," he said without preamble. "Town's too far for them to walk daily. My wife teaches our grandchildren 3 days a week. She was a school teacher back east before we moved west. Your two are welcome to join them." Noah was touched by the unexpected offer. "That's very generous, Mr. Carson," Carson shrugged. "Children need learning wherever they are. 8 o'clock sharp, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the main house." As promised, Noah took the children into Lewiston on Sundays for church services. The first Sunday, he felt self-conscious as they entered the small white church, aware of the curious glances from the townspeople. But Reverend Thomas welcomed them warmly, and several familiar faces nodded in greeting Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Thornton from the lumberyard, and a few of the other merchants Noah had met during his brief stay in town. And then there was Zoe, sitting midway down the left side of the church, wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes and a small hat trimmed with white flowers. She smiled when she saw them, gesturing to the empty space beside her on the pew. Throughout the service, Noah found his attention divided between the Reverend's sermon and the woman beside him. She sang the hymns in a clear, sweet voice, helped Emma find the right pages in the hymnal, and occasionally caught Noah's eye with a smile that made his heart beat a little faster. After the service, as the congregation gathered outside to socialize, Noah found himself surrounded by townspeople eager to introduce themselves. "So you're working for Carson now," said a weather-beaten man who introduced himself as Frank Miller, owner of the farm Zoe had mentioned. "Good man, Carson, fair." "That seems to be the consensus," Noah agreed. "Cabin working out all right for you and the little ones?" asked Mrs. Thornton, the lumberyard owner's wife. "Yes, madam. It's coming along nicely," Noah replied, surprised by the genuine interest. "If you need any help with it, you just let Henry know," she continued. "He's always got odd lots of lumber he can let go cheap." The offers of assistance continued. Mrs. Peterson had extra preserves she'd be happy to share. Dr. Harris would be glad to check the children's health at no charge. And Miss Bennett, the school teacher, offered to send home books for the children to read on the days they weren't attending Mrs. Carson's lessons. Throughout these conversations, Zoe remained at Noah's side, occasionally adding a comment or making an introduction, but mostly just providing a reassuring presence. Noah was struck by how easily she seemed to fit into his family's orbit, and how natural it felt to have her there. When the crowd began to disperse, Zoe turned to Noah. "Would you and the children like to join me for Sunday dinner? It's nothing fancy, but there's plenty." The invitation caught Noah off guard. Sunday dinner was a family affair, not something casually extended to acquaintances. Before he could formulate a response, Emma tugged at his hand. "Can we, Papa, please?" she begged, her eyes bright with excitement. Looking at his daughter's hopeful face, Noah found he couldn't refuse. "If you're sure it's no imposition," he said to Zoe. "Not at all," she assured him. "I always make too much on Sundays, out of habit from feeding my siblings. It would be nice to have company for a change." The meal in Zoe's small apartment above the shop was indeed simple roast chicken, potatoes, carrots, and fresh bread, but to Noah and his children, who had been living on basic ranch fare, it was a feast. The conversation flowed easily, with Daniel and Emma chattering about their lessons with Mrs. Carson and the new friends they'd made among the ranch hands' children. "And how are you finding ranch work?" Zoe asked Noah as she served apple pie for dessert. "It suits me," Noah replied. "Carson runs a tight operation, but he's reasonable in his expectations. The cabin's coming along too. We've got it properly cleaned out, and I've repaired most of the broken furniture. It's starting to feel like a home." "I'm glad," Zoe said softly. "You all deserve that." Their eyes met across the table, and Noah felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. It would be so easy to let these feelings grow, to allow himself to care for this woman who had already done so much for his family. "What about you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "How did you end up as a seamstress in Lewiston, Montana?" Zoe's expression grew thoughtful. "After my parents died, there wasn't much left for me in Ohio. My younger siblings went to live with an aunt, but there wasn't room for all of us. I'd always been good with a needle, so I took what money there was and bought a train ticket west. I had some vague idea about California or Oregon, but I ran out of funds in Billings." "How did you get from Billings to Lewiston?" Noah asked, fascinated by her journey. "I worked as a seamstress there for a few months, saving up. Then I heard that Lewiston needed someone with my skills. Their previous seamstress had moved on to Helena. It seemed like as good a place as any to settle." She smiled ruefully. "That was 3 years ago, and I'm still here." "Do you ever regret it?" Noah asked. "Coming west, I mean." Zoe considered this. "Sometimes I miss my family, but no, I don't regret it. I've built something here, a business, a home, friendships. That counts for a lot." "It does," Noah agreed, thinking of his own journey. "Sometimes the place you end up isn't where you intended to go, but it turns out to be where you belong." "Exactly," Zoe said, her eyes lighting up at his understanding. As the afternoon waned, Noah reluctantly gathered his children for the ride back to the ranch. At the door, Zoe handed him a small package. "Some cookies for the children's lunches this week," she explained. "And I took the liberty of mending that shirt you left behind the one you were wearing when you first arrived." Noah accepted the package, touched by her thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do that. I know," she said simply. "I wanted to." On impulse, Noah reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Zoe, for everything." Her fingers tightened around his for a moment before she let go. "You're welcome, Noah." It was the first time they had used each other's given names, and the sound of his name on her lips sent a shiver of pleasure through him. As Noah led his children down the stairs and helped them onto their horses for the ride back to the ranch, he found himself already looking forward to next Sunday. The summer days stretched long and golden as June gave way to July. Noah's work at the Carson Ranch kept him busy from dawn till dusk, but he found satisfaction in the labor and in the growing respect of his fellow ranch hands. The cabin continued to improve under his care. He built new shelves in the kitchen, repaired the stone fireplace, and with Mr. Thornton's help, constructed a small addition to serve as a washroom. The children thrived in their new environment. Daniel, always the more reserved of the two, gradually emerged from his shell, making friends with the Carson grandchildren and developing a keen interest in horses. Emma blossomed like a wildflower, her natural exuberance finding outlet in exploring the ranch and helping Mrs. Carson tend her kitchen garden. Each Sunday, they went to church in Lewiston, and each Sunday, Zoe invited them to dinner afterward. These meals became the highlight of Noah's week, a time when he could set aside the demands of the ranch and simply enjoy good food and better company. He found himself sharing stories of his childhood in Ohio, of his early days as a ranch hand in Kansas, and even, tentatively, memories of Sarah. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Zoe said one Sunday in late July as they sat on her small balcony, watching the children play in the garden below. "You must miss her terribly." "Every day," Noah admitted, "but it's different now than it was at first. The pain isn't as sharp, though it's still there." "I think that's how grief works," Zoe observed. "It doesn't disappear, but it changes form. Becomes something you can carry without being crushed by it." Noah looked at her curiously. "You speak as if from experience." Zoe was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "My parents, of course, and—" She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There was someone back in Ohio." We were to be married. Noah felt a sudden, irrational surge of jealousy. "What happened?" "Typhoid," she said simply. "The same epidemic that took my parents. Thomas was helping care for the sick when he contracted it himself." "I'm sorry," Noah said softly, understanding now the shadows that sometimes crossed her face. "That must have been devastating." "It was," Zoe acknowledged. "For a long time, I couldn't imagine ever caring for someone again. It felt like a betrayal of his memory, and besides, I'd seen firsthand how quickly happiness could be snatched away. What was the point in risking my heart again?" Her words echoed Noah's own thoughts so closely that it took him aback. "And now?" he asked, his voice lower than he intended. Zoe met his eyes directly. "Now I think perhaps the greater betrayal would be to close myself off from life entirely. Thomas would not have wanted that for me." "No," Noah agreed, thinking of Sarah. "Sarah wouldn't have wanted that for me either." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching as Daniel helped Emma build a small castle from twigs and pebbles in the garden below. "Noah," Zoe said finally, her voice hesitant, "there's a social dance at the town hall next Saturday evening. Would you? That is, would you and the children like to attend? Mrs. Peterson has already offered to watch the children once they grow tired, so the adults can continue dancing." The invitation hung in the air between them, its significance clear to both. This would not be a casual Sunday dinner or a chance meeting after church. This would be a deliberate step toward something more. Noah found himself at a crossroads. He could make an excuse too much work at the ranch, the children needing his attention, and maintain the safe, comfortable friendship they had established. Or he could accept, acknowledging the growing feelings between them and the possibility they represented. "I'd be honored to escort you to the dance," he said at last, his decision made. "Though I should warn you, my dancing skills are somewhat rusty." The smile that illuminated Zoe's face was worth any amount of risk. "I'm sure you'll remember quickly enough," she said, her eyes bright with happiness. "And if not, I'm a patient teacher." The week leading up to the dance passed with agonizing slowness for Noah. He found himself distracted at work, earning good-natured ribbing from the other ranch hands when he missed an obvious signal during a cattle drive. "Got your head in the clouds, O'Malley," teased Ben Wilson, a weathered cowhand who had become something of a friend. "Or maybe just thinking about a certain seamstress in town." Noah felt his face warm. "News travels fast," he muttered. Ben chuckled. "Small community. Besides, anyone with eyes can see the way you two look at each other on Sundays." By Saturday, Noah was a bundle of nerves. He bathed thoroughly in the creek that ran behind the cabin, trimmed his beard, and put on his best shirt, one of those Zoe had made for him, which he'd been saving for special occasions. The children watched his preparations with interest. "Are you and Miss Zoe going to get married?" Emma asked with a child's directness as Noah struggled to tame his unruly hair. Noah nearly dropped the comb. "What? No, that is, we're just friends, Emma. The dance is a social event, that's all." "But you like her," Emma persisted. "And she likes you, I can tell." "It's more complicated than that, sweetheart," Noah tried to explain. "Because of Mama?" Daniel asked quietly from the doorway. Noah turned to his son, his heart heavy. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because grown-up relationships take time to develop. Miss Zoe and I are still getting to know each other." Daniel considered this, then nodded solemnly. "I think Mama would want you to be happy," he said, "and Miss Zoe makes you happy. I can tell because you smile more when she's around." Noah knelt before his son, deeply moved by the child's insight and generosity. "You're a wise boy, Daniel O'Malley," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your mama would be very proud of you." The town hall was festooned with lanterns and wildflowers when they arrived that evening. Many of Lewiston's residents were already there, the women in their best dresses and the men in cleaned and pressed shirts. A small band played lively tunes in one corner, and several couples were already dancing. Noah scanned the room anxiously, finally spotting Zoe near the refreshment table, talking with Mrs. Peterson. She wore a dress he hadn't seen before, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, which she'd arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck, with a few curls framing her face. She looked up as they approached, and the smile that lit her face made Noah's heart skip a beat. He suddenly felt like a tongue-tied youth rather than a grown man with 2 children. "You came," she said, as if she'd half expected him to change his mind. "Of course," Noah replied, finding his voice. "I promised." The evening unfolded like a dream. As predicted, Mrs. Peterson took charge of Daniel and Emma, introducing them to the other children and making sure they were included in the simpler dances. Noah and Zoe danced together, sometimes with others, but always finding their way back to each other. "You're a better dancer than you let on," Zoe commented during a lively reel, her cheeks flushed with exertion and pleasure. "You're a good partner," Noah replied. "You make it easy to follow the steps." As the evening progressed, the band shifted to slower tunes. Noah hesitated, but Zoe took his hand and led him back to the dance floor. In the soft light of the lanterns, with Zoe in his arms, the last of Noah's reservations began to crumble. She fit against him as if she belonged there, her head just the right height to rest against his shoulder. "I'm glad you invited me tonight," he murmured into her hair, breathing in the scent of lavender that clung to her. "I'm glad you accepted," she replied, looking up at him with those clear blue eyes that seemed to see straight to his soul. Later, after Mrs. Peterson had taken the sleepy children to her home for the night, Noah walked Zoe back to her shop under a canopy of stars. They moved slowly, reluctant for the evening to end, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. At her door, they paused, suddenly shy with each other despite the intimacy they'd shared on the dance floor. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Zoe said, her voice soft in the quiet night. "Thank you for inviting me," Noah replied. He hesitated, then added, "Zoe, I've been thinking." "Yes," she encouraged when he faltered. Noah took a deep breath. "I care for you," he said simply. "More than I expected to, and certainly more than I planned to when I rode into Lewiston. I know it hasn't been that long, and there's the matter of Sarah's memory and the children to consider." But Zoe stepped forward and placed her finger gently against his lips, stopping his nervous flow of words. "Noah," she said, her eyes luminous in the moonlight, "I care for you too, very much. And I don't think Sarah would want you to be alone forever, especially not for her sake." Noah caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture of tenderness that made her breath catch. "Daniel said something similar," he admitted. "He's a perceptive child." "He is," Zoe agreed. "And he and Emma deserve happiness as much as you do." "As do you," Noah added softly. Their eyes met, and the moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Noah leaned forward slowly, giving Zoe every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she rose on tiptoe to meet him halfway, and when their lips finally met, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and brief, but it sealed something between them, a promise, a beginning. When they parted, both were smiling. "I should go," Noah said reluctantly. "The children will be waiting," Zoe nodded. "Sunday dinner tomorrow?" she asked, and he heard the new note of affection in her voice. "We wouldn't miss it," he assured her. As Noah walked back to Mrs. Peterson's to collect his children, his steps were light despite his weariness. The future, which had seemed so uncertain when he rode into Lewiston with his children and little else, now stretched before him filled with promise. The weeks that followed the dance were the happiest Noah had known since Sarah's death. His relationship with Zoe deepened gradually, like a river finding its natural course. Sunday dinners continued, but now there were also picnics by the creek on his rare days off, and sometimes Zoe would ride out to the ranch in the evening to share a simple supper in the cabin. The children accepted the change in their father's relationship with an ease that surprised Noah. Daniel, always observant, seemed to understand instinctively that Zoe wasn't replacing his mother, but rather bringing something new into their lives. Emma simply adored Zoe and basked in the additional female attention. August brought the heat of high summer to Montana, and with it, a surprise visit from James Carson to the cabin one evening. "O'Malley," he said, dismounting from his horse with the ease of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Got a proposition for you." Noah invited his employer inside, offering him coffee which Carson accepted with a nod. "You've proven yourself a good worker these past months," Carson began without preamble. "Reliable, skilled, good with the stock. The men respect you." "Thank you, sir," Noah said. Wondering where this was leading, Carson sipped his coffee, then set the cup down decisively. "My foreman, Jenkins, is moving on. His wife's got family in California, and they're heading west before winter sets in. I need a new foreman, and I think you're the man for the job." Noah was momentarily speechless. Foreman was a significant step up from ranch hand, more responsibility, better pay, and most importantly, more security for his family. "I'm honored by your confidence, Mr. Carson," he said when he found his voice. "I'd be proud to accept the position." Carson nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. "Good. There's one more thing. The foreman's house is sitting empty now that Jenkins and his wife have moved into town until they leave. It's closer to the main house, bigger than this cabin and in better repair. It would suit a family better, especially one that might be growing." Noah felt his face warm at the implication in Carson's words. Had his feelings for Zoe become so obvious to everyone? "That's very generous," he managed. Carson waved away his thanks. "It's practical. Can't have my foreman living all the way out here when he needs to be available at a moment's notice. You can move in at the end of the month, after Jenkins and his wife head west." After Carson left, Noah sat on the porch for a long time, contemplating this unexpected turn of events. The foreman's position would mean more stability, better wages, and a proper house for his children. It would mean putting down real roots in Lewiston, committing to a future here, and it would mean taking the next step with Zoe if she was willing. The thought sent a mixture of fear and anticipation coursing through him. The following Sunday, after dinner, when the children were playing in the garden, Noah told Zoe about Carson's offer. "Noah, that's wonderful," she exclaimed, genuine pleasure lighting her face. "You've earned it with your hard work and dedication." "It means we're staying in Lewiston," Noah said, watching her reaction carefully, "making a permanent home here." "I'm glad," Zoe said softly. "I've grown rather attached to having you and the children around." Noah took her hand, his heart pounding. "Zoe, I need to ask you something." "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. "These past months have been. I've been happier than I ever expected to be again," he began awkwardly. "You've brought joy back into my life and into my children's lives." "I know it hasn't been that long, and if you think it's too soon, I understand completely. But I love you, Zoe Larson, and I believe we could build a good life together." Zoe's eyes widened as she realized where he was heading. "Noah, would you consider becoming my wife?" he asked, the words rushing out now. "A mother to Daniel and Emma. I know it's a lot to ask their wonderful children, but raising someone else's children isn't easy, and there's your shop to consider. I wouldn't expect you to give it up. We could figure out an arrangement that works for both of us. And if you need more time to think about it, that's completely understandable. Yes, Zoe interrupted, tears of happiness sparkling in her eyes. Yes, Noah O'Malley, I will marry you. Noah stared at her, hardly daring to believe his ears. You will. I will, she confirmed, laughing through her tears. I love you, and I love Daniel and Emma. I want nothing more than to build a life with all of you. Noah pulled her into his arms, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. As their lips met in a kiss that sealed their commitment, he felt the last of the shadows that had haunted him since Sarah's death begin to fade. There would always be a place in his heart for his first wife, the mother of his children. But there was room, too, for this new love, unexpected, unplanned, but no less precious for that. They agreed to wait until October for the wedding, when the most demanding work of the ranch season would be complete, and they would have time for a short honeymoon trip to Helena. In the meantime, Noah and the children moved into the foreman's house, a sturdy 2-story structure with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and even a small parlor. It was the most substantial home Noah had lived in since leaving Ohio, and watching his children explore their new surroundings filled him with profound gratitude. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Lewiston and was met with universal approval. Mrs. Peterson declared she'd known all along they were perfect for each other, and Reverend Thomas expressed his pleasure at being asked to perform the ceremony. September brought the first hint of autumn to Montana, the days still warm but the nights increasingly crisp. Noah found himself busier than ever with his new responsibilities as foreman, but he made time each day to work on preparing the house for Zoe's arrival. He built new shelves in the kitchen to accommodate her cookware, constructed a sturdy workbench in the spare bedroom where she could continue her sewing when not at the shop, and with Daniel and Emma's help, planted flower bulbs around the perimeter of the house that would bloom in the spring. Zoe, meanwhile, divided her time between running her shop and preparing for the wedding. She sewed a simple but elegant wedding dress of cream-colored silk, altered one of her best dresses for Emma to wear as a flower girl, and made matching vests for Noah and Daniel. 2 weeks before the wedding, Zoe received an unexpected letter that brought both joy and logistical challenges. It's from my sister Rebecca in Ohio. She told Noah that evening as they sat on the porch of the foreman's house, enjoying the sunset. She and my brother Matthew want to come for the wedding. They've been saving for train tickets ever since I wrote about our engagement. That's wonderful news, Noah said, genuinely pleased for her. It will be good for you to have family present. It is, Zoe agreed. But they'll need somewhere to stay. Mrs. Peterson's boarding house is full with the cattle buyers in town for the fall sales. They'll stay here, of course, Noah said without hesitation. Daniel can bunk with me and Emma can sleep in the trundle bed in our room. That will free up 2 bedrooms. Zoe looked at him with such love that it took his breath away. You're a good man, Noah O'Malley. I'm a fortunate man, he corrected, drawing her closer. Soon to be married to the most remarkable woman in Montana Territory. Rebecca and Matthew Larson arrived 3 days before the wedding, bringing with them memories of Ohio and family heirlooms. Zoe had been forced to leave behind their mother's wedding quilt, their grandmother's silver teapot, and photographs of their parents and siblings. They would have loved you, Rebecca told Noah on the eve of the wedding as they sat around the kitchen table after dinner. Our parents, I mean. They always wanted Zoe to find happiness. After Thomas died, we worried she never would, Matthew added, his expression somber. She was so devastated. When she decided to go west, Part of me thought she was running away from the memories. Maybe I was, Zoe admitted, her hand finding Noah's under the table. But I found something worth staying for. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect autumn day that seemed designed for new beginnings. The small church in Lewiston was filled to capacity, with well-wishers, ranch hands, and their families, townspeople who had come to appreciate Noah during his months in Lewiston, and longtime customers of Zoe's who had watched her build her business from nothing. Noah stood at the altar, Daniel at his side as his best man, both of them wearing the vests Zoe had made. His heart pounded as the church door opened and Emma entered, scattering flower petals with solemn concentration. Rebecca followed as Zoe's maid of honor, and then, finally, Zoe herself appeared on Matthew's arm. She was radiant in her cream-colored dress, her auburn hair arranged in an elegant knot adorned with small white flowers. But it was the joy in her eyes as she walked toward him that Noah would remember most clearly in the years to come, a joy that mirrored his own and promised a future filled with love and shared purpose. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to care for each other and for Daniel and Emma, to build a life together based on mutual respect and enduring love. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, and Noah kissed his bride to the cheers of their friends and family, he felt a sense of rightness that confirmed what his heart had known for months. This was exactly where he was meant to be. The reception was held at the Carson Ranch, in the large barn that had been cleared of its usual occupants and decorated with autumn flowers and lanterns. There was music and dancing, abundant food prepared by Mrs. Peterson and the other women of the town, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As the celebration continued around them, Noah and Zoe stole a moment alone, stepping outside to gaze at the stars that spangled the Montana sky. "Happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" Noah asked, his arm around his wife's waist. "Completely," Zoe replied, leaning into his embrace. "And you, husband?" "More than I ever thought possible," he admitted, turning to face her. "When I rode into Lewiston with 2 children and little else, I never imagined I'd find a home here, or a love like this. It seems we were both due for some unexpected happiness," Zoe said, her voice soft in the darkness. Noah kissed her then, a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, the home they would build, the family they would nurture, the love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. "Ready to go back inside?" he asked when they finally parted. "In a moment," Zoe said, her expression turning serious. "I wanted to tell you something first. I wasn't sure when the right time would be, but Noah, I'm with child." Noah stared at her, momentarily stunned. We're going to have a baby," Zoe nodded, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Dr. Harris confirmed it yesterday. I know we haven't discussed expanding our family so soon, and with Daniel and Emma and my shop, and your new position," Noah silenced her with a kiss, his heart overflowing with joy. "A baby," he whispered against her lips. "Our baby." The radiance of Zoe's smile rivaled the stars overhead. "You're pleased, then?" "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," Noah assured her, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "This child will be so loved, Zoe, by all of us." Hand in hand, they returned to their wedding celebration, their shared secret adding an extra layer of joy to the evening. As they danced together, surrounded by friends and family, Noah reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. He had ridden into Lewiston with torn clothes and 2 motherless children, searching for nothing more than a temporary safe haven. Instead, he had found a home, a community, and in Zoe, a love he hadn't been looking for but now couldn't imagine living without. As the night deepened and their guests began to depart, Noah gazed at his new family, Daniel and Emma, tired but happy. Zoe, his wife, carrying their unborn child, and felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, bound by a love that had been as unexpected as it was unshakable. The O'Malley family's story was just beginning, but already it was a tale worth telling of loss and renewal, of journeys that end in unexpected places, and of love that heals even the deepest wounds. It was a story that had begun with a weary rider in torn clothes and a kind-hearted seamstress who measured his children first, prioritizing their needs before his own, a simple act of compassion that had set in motion a chain of events leading to this perfect moment of wholeness and belonging. And as Noah led his family home under the vast Montana sky, he knew with absolute certainty that the best chapters of their story were still to come. 5 years later, the O'Malley home on the Carson Ranch was filled with the joyful chaos of a growing family. Noah and Zoe's son, Thomas James O'Malley, now 4 years old, chased his 2-year-old sister, Sarah Rebecca, through the kitchen as Zoe attempted to prepare dinner. "Easy there, young riders," Noah called as he entered through the back door, hanging his hat on the peg by the entrance. "Your mama's trying to cook." "Papa," the children chorused, abandoning their game to rush toward him. Noah scooped them both up, one in each arm, and planted kisses on their cheeks before setting them down again. "Where are your brother and sister?" "Daniel's helping Mr. Carson with the new foal," Thomas reported importantly. "And Emma's at her piano lesson with Mrs. Peterson." "Very good," Noah approved, crossing to Zoe and placing a kiss on her cheek. "And how are you, wife?" Zoe smiled, leaning into him briefly before returning to her cooking. "Better now that you're home. How was the cattle drive?" "Successful," Noah reported. "All 20 head delivered to the railway station without incident. Carson's pleased." In the 5 years since their marriage, life had settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Noah continued as foreman of the Carson Ranch, his position secure and respected. Zoe had maintained her seamstress shop in town, though now she worked there only 3 days a week, with an assistant handling the simpler alterations. The rest of her time was devoted to their growing family and to creating special commissioned pieces that allowed her to exercise her considerable talent. Daniel, now 11, had developed into a serious, responsible young man with a natural affinity for horses that had caught James Carson's attention. The ranch owner had begun taking a special interest in the boy's education, teaching him the finer points of horse breeding and ranch management. Emma, at 9, was blossoming into a bright, artistic girl who had discovered a love of music when Mrs. Peterson began giving piano lessons to the town's children. Her natural talent had prompted Noah and Zoe to invest in a small piano for their home, which now occupied a place of honor in their parlor. And then there were the 2 youngest O'Malleys, born of Noah and Zoe's union but loved equally by all members of the family. Thomas had his father's green eyes and his mother's auburn hair, while little Sarah was the image of her namesake, with blonde curls and a sweet, gentle nature. "Daniel asked me something interesting today," Noah said as they sat down to dinner later, the family gathered around the large table he had built shortly after Thomas's birth. "What's that?" Zoe asked, helping Sarah cut her meat into manageable pieces. "He wanted to know if I would teach him to build furniture," Noah said. "Apparently, he's been admiring that cradle I made for Thomas, and he thinks he'd like to try his hand at woodworking." "That's wonderful," Zoe said, her eyes lighting up. "He's always been good with his hands." "I told him we could start with something simple, maybe a small stool or a box, and see how he takes to it." Noah looked at his eldest son with pride. "He's growing up so fast." "We all are," Daniel pointed out with the logic of a child on the cusp of adolescence. "That's what people do." The adults laughed, and even Emma giggled at her brother's matter-of-fact statement. After dinner, as the younger children were put to bed, and Daniel and Emma settled in the parlor with their respective activities, Daniel with a book about horses, Emma practicing softly on the piano, Noah and Zoe took advantage of the mild evening to sit on the porch together. "I had a letter from Rebecca today," Zoe mentioned as they watched the sun setting over the distant mountains. "She's expecting again." "That's wonderful news," Noah said, genuinely pleased for Zoe's sister and her husband, who had moved to Billings 2 years earlier to be closer to the O'Malleys. "Their third, isn't it?" "Yes, and she's hoping for a girl this time after 2 boys." Zoe hesitated, then added, "It made me think." "About having another baby," Noah guessed, knowing his wife well. Zoe nodded, looking slightly uncertain. "Is that crazy? We already have 4 children." "Not crazy at all," Noah assured her, taking her hand in his. "Our home is filled with love, Zoe. There's always room for more." "You wouldn't mind then?" she asked, her blue eyes searching his face. "If we were to have another child, mind?" Noah pulled her close, his heart full to bursting with love for this woman who had transformed his life. "Zoe O'Malley, nothing would make me happier than to welcome another child with you." Their lips met in a tender kiss that held the promise of their future together, a future that had begun on a dusty street in Lewiston, when a seamstress with a kind heart had taken the time to care for 2 travel-worn children and their broken-hearted father. "I love you," Noah whispered against her lips. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "And I love you," Zoe replied, her voice soft with emotion. "Always and forever." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Noah held his wife close, gratitude washing through him for the unexpected journey that had brought them together. He had ridden into town with torn clothes and a wounded spirit, seeking only temporary shelter. Instead, he had found healing, purpose, and a love that continued to grow with each passing day. Some might call it luck or coincidence that had led him to Lewiston and to Zoe. But Noah preferred to think of it as destiny, the kind that reveals itself not in grand, dramatic moments, but in simple acts of kindness, like a seamstress who measured his children first.